I thought my husband was working late until I found a dinner reservation under his name, for two. I rushed to the restaurant and saw him laughing with a woman, holding her hand. Heart racing, I walked up and said, "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" The woman turned pale, whispering, "You said she was out of town." My husband stammered, but I pulled out my phone and said, "Don't worry, I already made reservations." At the divorce lawyer's office. I'm 43, been married to Mark, 45, for 17 years. We live in Chicago. I work from home as a freelance interior designer. Mark is a regional sales manager for a tech company. He travels a lot for work, used to be just a few times a year, then it became monthly, then more. We have 2 kids. A 12-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. I won't go into too many details about them, but they're the kind of kids that make all the hard parts of life feel okay. You look at them and you remember why you get up every morning. Anyway. Here's what happened. Mark started changing about a year and a half ago. Not all at once. Just small things. He used to call me on lunch breaks. Those stopped. Then he started showering as soon as he got home from work. Stopped wearing his wedding ring on trips. Said it got tight. New cologne. New shirt styles. He wasn't a fashion guy, suddenly he's dressing like he's trying to impress someone. I asked questions. I wasn't quiet about it. Who's she? I'd ask, half joking, half not. He'd laugh and say, "It's just work. You're being paranoid." Every time I pushed, he'd say I was imagining things. That I was jealous. That I needed to trust him. So I tried. I swallowed it down. I believed him. This happened about 14 months ago. January. Snow everywhere. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache. I was in our shared home office looking for an old invoice. Mark had switched everything to his work phone and laptop years ago, but we still had some old stuff in the desk drawer. And there it was. His old paper planner. One he hadn't used in years. I opened it, curious more than anything. Flipping through it, I saw the date, January 17th. There, written in his handwriting, Trattoria Sofia, 7:30 p.m. table for 2. That's a romantic Italian restaurant in Fulton Market. White tablecloths. Soft lighting. One of our special occasion spots. We'd been there for our anniversary twice. No one just casually eats there. I stared at the page for a solid minute. Checked the date again. That was tonight. I checked my phone. Mark had texted me an hour ago saying he had to stay late at work for a meeting with the Dallas team. I didn't think. I just acted. I called the restaurant. "Hi," I said. "Can you check a reservation for Mark D at 7:30 tonight?" The hostess was friendly. "Yes, reservation for 2, by the window," she said. "Would you like to add another guest?" "No. Thank you." I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I grabbed my keys and left. Chicago traffic at 7 p.m. is no joke, but I barely noticed. My hands were shaking. I was holding onto the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Thoughts were flying through my head. What if it's a business dinner? What if I'm wrong? What if I walk in there and look like a fool? But I knew. I knew. Deep in my chest, I knew what I was going to see. Trattoria Sofia has these big frosted windows. You can sort of see silhouettes, but not faces. I parked across the street and walked up slowly, staying out of view. When I got close enough, I looked in. There he was. Mark. And across from him? A woman. Blonde. Pretty. Not young, but definitely younger than me. They were laughing. Laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. And then he did it. He reached across the table and held her hand. My stomach dropped. I froze. Time stopped. All those nights he said he was working late. All those trips. All the excuses. All the fights where he made me feel crazy, they slammed into me at once. I don't know what made me do it. I could have walked away. Called a lawyer. Screamed in the street. Anything else. But instead, I walked in. The hostess looked at me, confused. She recognized me. We'd celebrated our 10th anniversary here. I didn't say a word. I walked straight to their table. Mark was mid-laugh when he saw me. His face went white. The woman looked confused at first. Then scared. I stood there for maybe 3 seconds. Then I said, "Excuse me. Is this seat taken?" Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at Mark, then back at me. And then she whispered, "You said she was out of town." Mark opened his mouth. Lena, I didn't let him finish. I pulled out my phone and said, "Don't worry. I already made a reservation. At the divorce lawyer's office." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I turned around and walked out of that restaurant like my feet were on fire. I drove to my best friend Priya's house. I rang the bell and collapsed into her arms. I told her everything. Mark texted me 17 times that night. Called 5 times. I didn't answer. I still haven't. That was 3 days ago. He's been staying at a hotel, I think. He hasn't come back home. He left his toothbrush, his clothes, his things. But I don't even care. My kids don't know yet. I've been sleeping in the guest room so they don't see me cry. I haven't told anyone but Priya. Not even my parents. The silence in this house is the loudest thing I've ever heard. That's where I am right now. There's more, I know it. I feel it in my gut. This wasn't a one-time thing. But I don't have proof yet. I'm just processing. I gave this man 17 years of my life. We built a family. A home. A life. And he gave me a lie. If you've been through this, how did you survive the days that followed? Because right now, I don't feel like I'm surviving anything. I didn't talk to Mark for 4 days. Not one word. I moved like a ghost around the house. Fed the kids. Answered emails. Showered. Ate toast. That was about all I could manage. I was in the middle of changing the laundry when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Chicago area code. I opened the message. "Hi. I think we need to talk. I didn't know he was married. I'm so sorry." No name. Just that. I stared at the screen. My mouth went dry. I texted back, "Who is this?" The reply came seconds later. "Julia. From the restaurant. Please don't be angry at me. He told me you were divorced and lived in Seattle." I sat down on the laundry room floor. Just sat. I told her to call me. My hands were shaking when the phone rang. Her voice? Nervous. Young-sounding. Very polite. She said she met Mark 6 months ago. At an airport bar in Dallas. He told her he was divorced. Said his ex-wife moved to Seattle with the kids. Said he traveled a lot and didn't have a stable place yet, but he was finally happy. They started texting. Talking. Meeting up when he was on the road. She told me about a weekend trip to Minneapolis. Said they went to the Mall of America and stayed in a hotel. He held my hand the whole time, she said. He used his real name. Real job. Just edited the wife and kids out. I asked her, flat out, "Did you sleep with him?" She paused. Then, yes. I didn't cry. I don't think I even blinked. She said she found out I existed because someone tagged him on Facebook in an old post from our daughter's birthday. She clicked on it. Found my page. Saw our life. Family photos. Anniversaries. Smiling Christmas mornings. She confronted him last week. He said we were working on divorce paperwork and that I was emotionally unstable. She said she was going to break it off. But then he convinced her to go to dinner one last time. "I didn't know you'd actually show up," she whispered. I was numb for hours after the call. Later that night, I went into our closet to grab something. I noticed Mark's old laptop on the top shelf. Covered in dust. He hadn't used it in years. I took it down. Plugged it in. To my surprise, it booted right up. No password. Idiot. And there it was, his personal Gmail. Still logged in. I didn't want to look. But I did. He had a folder called Work Trips. Inside? Photos. Lots of them. Selfies with Julia. Hotel room pics. One photo showed them in bed, fully clothed, thankfully, but still. It was real. Undeniable. But here's the twist. There were other women. Another name popped up, C, and another, Steph. I opened the emails. He had been cheating for years. At least 4 different women. Each one got the same script. Divorced. Ex-wife lives out of state. Kids visit sometimes. I'm not ready to introduce you to them yet. Some emails had calendar invites. Reservations. A hotel confirmation from Miami, during a weekend he said he was visiting his mom in Rockford. My hands were sweating. My jaw was clenched so tight I thought I'd break a tooth. This wasn't just cheating. This was a whole other life. That night, I did something I said I wouldn't do. I called him. He answered on the first ring. Sounded out of breath. Lena. Thank God. I've been losing my mind. I didn't even say hello. How long have you been cheating? Silence. Then, Lena, listen, answer the question. How long? He said nothing. I asked again. Mark. How long? His voice was small. Weak. A few years. I laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was one of those bitter, dry things that just leaks out of your throat. I told him I found the photos. The emails. The names. He started crying. I could hear him sniffling through the line. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said. I was unhappy. I felt invisible. I didn't know how to fix us. I lost it. You felt invisible? While I was wiping our daughter's vomit off the carpet and making you dinner at 10 p.m.? While I was holding this whole house together so you could go play house with strangers? He tried apologizing. Rambling. Saying he was going to get help. That he'd go to therapy. That he'd do anything. I told him I'd be in touch through a lawyer. And then I hung up. The next day, around 6 p.m., someone knocked on the front door. I opened it, and there was another woman. Late 30s. Brunette. Looked as shocked as I felt. Are you Lena? I nodded slowly. I'm Steph, she said. I just found out about you yesterday. Steph stood on my porch wearing a long beige coat and holding her car keys like a weapon. Her eyes were red. I could tell she had been crying. I'm sorry to just show up, she said. I didn't know where else to go. I let her in. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed someone else who knew. Someone else who got it. We sat at my kitchen table. I made tea we didn't drink. She started talking. Steph met Mark 2 years ago. She was working at a conference in Indianapolis. She was an events coordinator, Mark was a vendor rep. He gave her his card. Took her out for drinks. And then? He told me his ex-wife cheated on him, she said, voice shaking. He said she left him and took the kids. Said she was toxic. He played the victim so well. She said they dated for almost a year before he got distant. She thought it was her. That she did something wrong. But 2 months ago, he came back. Apologized. Said he was finally in a better place. Then they started seeing each other again. She showed me a picture on her phone. Mark was holding her hand. Smiling. Standing in front of a fireplace. That fireplace looked familiar. I leaned in closer. And then my stomach dropped. It was my living room. Same stonework. Same mantle. Same ugly vase I kept meaning to get rid of. When was this taken? I asked. November, she said. The weekend before Thanksgiving. I was out of town that weekend, with the kids. Visiting my sister in Milwaukee. Mark had said he had to work and couldn't come. So he brought Steph into our house. Into our bed. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m., I got out of bed and went to the closet. I remembered something. Something small. Mark had this leather-bound journal. He said it helped him clear his mind during work trips. I had never read it. I respected privacy. But not anymore. I found it buried under winter scarves. I flipped it open. Most pages were empty. Some were work notes. Sales numbers. But then I saw a few entries that made my blood run cold. There was one from December. Just a few lines. Steph asked about the kids again. Lied and said I'm fighting for partial custody. Can't let her know I never filed. Julia still believes I'm moving to Houston. Another entry, earlier, too close last time. Forgot Lena's trip schedule. Need to double-check the school calendar before I bring anyone over again. He was tracking me. Like a damn criminal. Another entry, C is asking for commitment. Told her I might propose. Just need more time. Propose? Who the hell is C? That's when I did something I hadn't done yet. I sat down with a notebook. And I listed them out. Julia, 6 months, met in Dallas, thought I lived in Seattle. Steph, 2 years, on and off, brought her into my house. See, no details yet, but he might have promised marriage. Emails on the laptop, at least 2 other women. No names yet. Journal, mentions more lies, carefully timed schedules, and fake custody claims. Mark wasn't having an affair. Mark was running a whole network. Like a full-time job. But instead of clients, it was women. And instead of money, he traded attention, lies, and time. On Monday, I got a call from the school. It was our son's math teacher. Apparently, a woman named Christina showed up at the school last Friday, saying she was a family friend and asked if she could drop off lunch for Noah. The staff didn't allow it. Thank God. But they reported it. I asked what she looked like. Blonde. Mid-30s. Friendly smile. My stomach twisted. That had to be C. He was bringing these women so far into our lives that now they were showing up at my children's school. I called Mark. Straight to voicemail. I sent one message. If any of them show up near my kids again, you'll be dealing with police, not lawyers. No reply. The very next day, a package arrived for Mark. I was about to toss it in the trash when I saw the return address, Houston, Texas. I opened it. Inside was a baby onesie. Pale yellow. Tiny. With a note. Can't wait for us to start this chapter together. I love you. See. My hands were shaking. My head was pounding. He got someone pregnant. Mark came back. After all the silence, after ignoring every message, he finally showed up on a rainy Thursday afternoon like nothing had happened. He rang the bell like he used to. 3 short rings. I looked through the peephole. He was holding a bouquet of red roses and a reusable grocery bag slung over one shoulder. I opened the door just a crack. Lena, please. Let me talk. I let him in. Not because I forgave him. Not because I wanted answers. But because I needed to look him in the eye and say the things burning in my chest. He stepped in, dripping wet, nervous. The roses shook in his hands. We stood in the entryway, barely 2 feet apart. I didn't wait. I walked to the kitchen. Grabbed the onesie and his journal. Threw both on the table. Who's pregnant, Mark? His eyes widened. He didn't speak right away. I found the laptop. The journal. I talked to Julia. I met Steph. I know everything. He opened his mouth to deny something. I saw the lie forming on his tongue, but then he stopped. He pulled out a chair. Sat down. And started crying. Like really crying. Shoulders shaking, face red, nose running. I'd never seen him like that. I stood, arms crossed, watching the man I thought I knew completely fall apart. I messed up, he kept saying. I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with me. I didn't say anything. It was like, every time I got scared of failing or felt small, I looked for someone to fill the hole. I didn't buy it. You didn't fill a hole. You dug one. And you dragged every one of us into it. He nodded. I didn't mean to hurt you. That's when I finally snapped. You didn't mean to hurt me? Mark, you used our home like a hotel for your lies. You let a woman who thought you loved her walk into our son's school. You made up stories about me being crazy, unstable, deadbeat. You promised to marry someone else while I was here putting our daughter's fever down with wet towels. I was yelling. Loud enough that Bella called from upstairs, Mom? I froze. Mark stood up like he might go talk to her. I blocked him. Don't. You don't get to play dad right now. That's when he said it. It's not just C. There's another one. In San Diego. I blinked. I've been supporting her. She had a miscarriage 2 months ago. She thought it was mine. I had no words left. None. He sat back down. Stared at the floor. I lost control. No, I said quietly. You gave it up. You chose this. Then I heard footsteps. Noah and Bella coming down. Noah looked between us. Bella clutched her stuffed animal. Why's Daddy crying? Mark knelt down. His voice cracked. Daddy made mistakes. Grown-up mistakes. I stepped in. Told the kids gently to go upstairs. I'd explain later. They left. But not before Bella looked at Mark and said, Are you going to stay here again? He couldn't answer. That night, Mark stayed at a motel. I told my parents everything the next day. My mom cried. My dad was furious. Priya came over and helped me bag up Mark's things. We boxed his clothes, his shoes, even his shaving kit. When Mark came by to pick them up, Priya stood in the doorway with me. He tried to hug me. I flinched. He looked at Priya and said, "She won't even let me apologize." Priya said, calmly but firmly, "She doesn't owe you forgiveness. You owe her decades." A week later, I created a group message. Julia. Steph. C, who I finally found, Christina. And another woman named Rachel, who emailed me after reading my public Facebook post. I told them everything. Timeline. Lies. Crossovers. Photos. They were horrified. Julia left the chat crying emoji after crying emoji. Christina didn't reply at all. Steph wrote, "I knew something was off. I just didn't want to believe it." Rachel said, "He told me his wife died of cancer." That one made me physically sick. We had one final mediation before court. Mark came in looking like a shadow of himself. Hollow-eyed. Gaunt. His lawyer did most of the talking. He offered to give me full custody with generous child support. Said he wouldn't fight for the house. Said he just wanted peace. I didn't thank him. I didn't smile. I nodded. Signed the papers. It's been 3 months. Divorce finalized. The house is mine. The kids are adjusting. Noah's in therapy. Bella started sleeping with me for a while, but now she's back in her own bed. Mark sends gifts. Cards. Guilt wrapped in cardboard. I let the kids decide what they want to do with them. As for me? Some days I cry in the shower. Some days I eat ice cream straight from the tub at 2 a.m. Some days I feel like I'm floating. Some days I feel like I'm made of steel. But I'm still here. I'm standing. And I'm learning that surviving betrayal doesn't make you bitter. It makes you clear. Clear on what you will and won't tolerate. Clear on who you are without them. Clear on the fact that being alone is far better than being lied to with a warm body next to you. I gave Mark 17 years. He gave me 5 versions of himself. Now? I'm finally giving myself back to me. Still not sure what comes next. But I'll walk toward it with my head up, and no lies weighing me down.